Greetings, adventurers. You're listening to The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood with me, Professor Atwood. I'm glad you're here, and I can't wait to tell you about my latest journey. Don't worry, it's a safe space. I'll handle all the danger for you. I designed these stories to help you relax, chill anxiety, and go to sleep. Maybe they'll even put a smile on your face, even if it's a sleepy smile. So please, settle in, relax, and prepare to quietly drift off with me to parts known, unknown, and even some places in between. Comfortable? Very well. Let's get underway. Good evening, adventurers. I hope you're doing well. I also hope you're all cozy and settled in because tonight I'm going to tell you all about my preparations to set off to confront Professor P, my nemesis. As you remember from last time when I told you about my first adventure with Professor Sampson, my mentor, Professor P had challenged me to some kind of science duel. He was fuzzy on the details. And if I won, he would tell me the location of my long-lost mentor, Professor Sampson, who vanished mysteriously years ago. And as I've said before, unfortunately, even scientists have nemeses, and while they're usually too busy with nefarious plans to bother the helpful, useful, and benign scientists and adventurers, occasionally one takes the initiative with a side of malfeasance and can then cause all kinds of scientific havoc. That's where I was at the moment, preparing to confront Professor P, having to figure out how to defeat him in this vague science duel, and then learn the whereabouts of Professor Sampson. As I said before, years earlier, when I first learned of my mentor's sudden and mysterious disappearance, I did try to find him. I literally scoured the globe, but I had no luck and eventually had to give up the search. But I never lost hope. But now, Professor P had put me in a position I'm not really comfortable with, and I didn't really like it. But I had no choice. I had to play the insidious game Professor P had laid out for me. If there was a chance of finding Professor Sampson, I had to take it. Anyway, before I tell you about embarking on my latest journey, I'd like to mention something about our stories, especially for the new listeners. You Professor Atwood OGs, I think that's what Bradley says, already know the score. Anyway, the stories are designed for you to drift in and out of, and while, yes, I do like to tell you a full story every episode, drifting in and out or falling completely asleep is factored into the equation. You can pick things up anywhere, and that's why I do the story recaps at the beginning, and you can go back and listen to previous adventures anytime you wish. So by all means, enjoy the show any way you wish. It's designed that way. No rules and no pressure, adventurers. And as always, don't forget to rate and review the show, and maybe post about the show, as that's how other adventurers find us. And if you want more info, merchandise, and donation and Patreon subscription options, you can always go to whitecatentertainment.com, and that'll come with a little bit of extra content as well. And every little bit helps, and as always, we thank you for your support. All right, now let's get back to the story. Now, I'll admit I was still a bit shaken from the encounter with Professor P's messenger raven. While it was an unexpected challenge, I strengthened my resolve and became cautiously optimistic about finding Professor Sampson, my lost mentor. But I had to defeat Professor P, the leader of the Infinite Science Cabal, first. And as you remember, Professor P is short for Professor Papadoodle. It's difficult to say without smiling, and again, I think that's also one of the reasons he's so angry all the time. Anyway, As I started putting a strategy together in my head, I was also preparing for my journey. I would be going it alone, and the prep was going to take some time, but I would still need help before embarking on this adventure. I had called Frank, who served as a mechanic and diver on my ship, the Recovery. He was very interested in making vehicles eco-friendly and also faster, and I needed to make some upgrades on my submarine, the O2, STAT. He was already at the submarine dock implementing some of the upgrades. I would meet him there later. I had a few things I needed to take care of beforehand, including a stop at a museum, which I'll explain in a bit. First, I had to do some packing. I packed the usual items you need for an adventure, of course: a change of clothes for different types of weather, sunscreen, flare guns, provisions, a satellite phone with GPS, a backup GPS system, med kits, camping gear, at least 300 feet of waterproof rope, 6 unbreakable umbrellas, climbing gear, a portable hang glider, a deck of cards, and a gas mask, among other things. Now, I was hoping I wouldn't need all of those things, but it's always good to be prepared. I'm sure you're thinking, does he really need 6 unbreakable umbrellas? Well, yes, to be prepared, I believe I do. They are special customized umbrellas numbered 1 to 6, and each one serves a different function. And I know what you're thinking, no, none of them allow me to fly like Mary Poppins, although I am working on that for number 7. I've always found umbrellas just fascinating. Now, I know that's an unusual thing to say, but it is true. It's just the simple, elegant engineering and their history I've always found just interesting. You see, an umbrella or parasol is a folding canopy supported by wood or metal ribs that is mounted on a wooden, metal, or plastic pole. It is usually designed to protect a person against rain. The term umbrella is traditionally used when protecting oneself from rain, while parasol is used when protecting oneself from sunlight, though the terms continue to be used, interchangeably. Often the difference is the material used for the canopy. Some parasols are not waterproof, and some umbrellas are transparent, so not quite as helpful in the sun. Now, my unbreakable umbrella number 1 solves this problem and can be used for either. It has a UV light-sensing fabric, so when it's raining, the umbrella is clear, but when it's sunny, it will adjust to the strength of the sun and give me some light shade or total UV protection. Now, if I want to manually adjust it, I can do that as well, with a small dial built into the handle. Umbrella canopies may be made of fabric or flexible plastic, and generally speaking, parasols and umbrellas are small, handheld, personal use items. Golf umbrellas are the biggest hand-portable umbrellas available. There are 2 types of umbrellas: completely collapsible umbrellas, which can be folded up into a small enough bag because of the supporting metal pole's ability to telescopically retract, and non-collapsible umbrellas where only the canopy can be folded up. There are also various deployment systems such as manually operated umbrellas and spring-loaded automatic umbrellas which open with a button press. There are also fully automated umbrellas that deploy when rain is sensed, but the logistics, and to be honest, usefulness of that type of system is still being explored. Handheld umbrellas have a type of handle which can be made from wood, a plastic cylinder, or a bent crook handle, like the handle of a cane. Umbrellas are available in a range of price and quality points, ranging from inexpensive, modest quality models sold at discount stores to expensive, finely made, designer-labeled models. Larger parasols capable of blocking the sun for several people are often used as fixed or semi-fixed devices, used with patio tables or other outdoor furniture, or as points of shade on a sunny beach. Now, National Umbrella Day is held on February 10th each year around the world. Did you celebrate? Yeah, I don't think anyone does. Anyway, the pocket or foldable umbrella was invented in Hungary by the Balloch brothers, whose patent request was approved in 1923. Later on, their patent was also approved in Austria, Germany, Belgium, France, Poland, Great Britain, and the United States. In 1928, Hans Hopp's pocket umbrellas appeared. In Vienna in 1928, Slava Horowitz, a student studying sculpture at the Academy of Fine Arts, developed a prototype for an improved compact foldable umbrella for which she received a patent in September of 1929. The umbrella was called Flirt and manufactured by the Austrian company Bruder Wüster and their German associates Kurtenbach and Rau. Boy, these company names just roll off the tongue, don't they? In Germany, the small foldable umbrellas were produced by the company Knirps, which became a synonym in the German language for small foldable umbrellas in general. It also means little child in German, which is odd. In 1969, Bradford E. Phillips, the owner of Totes Incorporated of Loveland, Ohio, obtained a patent for his working foldable umbrella. Umbrellas have also been fashioned into hats as early as 1880 and at least as recently as 1987. They've never been in fashion and are used mainly by, well, drunk sports fans and self-loathing clowns. Golf umbrellas, one of the largest sizes in common use, are typically around 62 inches across, but can range anywhere from 60 to 70 inches. Transparent umbrellas, often made with plastic or composite materials, were invented in 1958 by Mitsuo Suodu. The transparent umbrellas were popularized as fashion items during the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. The production has since been relocated to China and other Asian countries and has become ubiquitous on Japanese streets due to its affordability, aesthetics, and ease of access. Umbrellas are now a consumer product with a large global market. As of 2008, most umbrellas worldwide are made in China. The city of Shangyu alone has more than 1,000 umbrella factories. In the US alone, about 33 million umbrellas, worth $348 million, are sold each year. Umbrellas continue to be actively developed. Now, I've been to an umbrella research lab, and I have to say it's a lot more exciting than you may think. But that may also have been because I went to the one in Langley, Virginia, that was being funded by the CIA. So there were a lot of features that I don't think will hit the consumer market anytime soon. Anyway, in the US, so many umbrella-related patents are being filed that the US Patent Office employs 4 full-time examiners to assess them. As of 2008, the office registered 3,000 active patents on umbrella-related inventions. Nevertheless, Totes, the largest American umbrella producer, has stopped accepting unsolicited proposals. Its director of umbrella development, yes, that's a real job, was reported as saying that while umbrellas are so ordinary and ubiquitous, quote, it's difficult to come up with an umbrella idea that hasn't already been done, end quote. I, of course, beg to differ on that assessment, but I have specific uses and purposes for my umbrellas, 1 through 6, and if I ever get around to filing more patents, the people at Totes may find themselves pleasantly surprised. Now, as I finished packing up my umbrellas, I admit it would have been nice to have my lab assistant Bradley help, but he was on a well-deserved vacation with his girlfriend/mercenary Dolores, and I did not want to disturb either one of them. As I said before, this was something I needed to do on my own. And while I rely on Bradley, and he is an absolutely remarkable lab assistant, I'm not one of those scientists who are completely dependent upon their lab assistants. I mean, that's what happened with Professor Marlin. He became too dependent on his lab assistant, Jasper. I warned him that lab assistants don't stick around forever, and you don't want them to, but Professor Marlin wouldn't listen. When it was time, his assistant, Jasper, moved on to become a full scientist and adventurer on his own. Professor Marlin had become so dependent on Jasper that he was completely lost when he left and couldn't even remember the code to his own lab. Jasper had to return from studying the Yetis in the Himalayas just to retrain Professor Marlin on key principles like atomic half-life, biophysics, quantum cloud computing, door key codes, and the coffee machine. I know Bradley is going to leave someday, and on that day I wish him well. But that day was a way off for now. I still had plenty to teach him. Anyway, all things considered, even after returning from space, it didn't look like I was going to be home for very long. But I'll be honest, I didn't mind. I have an adventurous, wandering spirit, as I'm sure all of you listening can understand and relate to, being adventurers yourselves. And as I've said before, there's nothing to be gained from rushing. Preparation was key, especially when confronting a nemesis. It would take me a little more time to finish my preparations. I had to make arrangements for the plants to be watered and the carnivorous ones fed, but this was pretty much standard adventure preparation protocol. I took a moment to once again visit my Site D library and picked a few books for the trip. I mean, I could read everything digitally, but as I've said before, it's not the same as having a physical book in your hand, especially when you're traveling in a submarine. The tactile satisfaction of turning the pages is part of the joy of reading, in my opinion. I took another look at my quiet, serene library and thought, I think adding an aquarium over a fireplace is the way to go. The gently bubbling sound as I watched the fish swim lazily back and forth would just add to the tranquil environment. I thought about adding it after I returned from wherever this adventure led me. I picked a couple of books, including Ready Player One, The Martian, and The Integral Trees, 3 of my favorite science fiction novels. Of course, would I have time to read them? That is another question. After another couple of hours of packing and preparation, I was ready to depart. I took one last look at my home lab and had a feeling this would be an adventure to remember, and one that would challenge and surprise me like never before. Time to get started. I got in my car and was on my way to the submarine dock. We had currently dry docked the sub to work on it, even though I was eager to get going as soon as possible. Still, I was sure I would need the upgrades, and I knew it would be worth the delay. As I drove through the LA traffic and of course got stuck on the 405, I tried to take a step back for a minute and take in the scale of this latest endeavor. It would be a lot, and there would be conflict involved, something that, as I've said before, is sometimes unavoidable. So I took that moment for myself. I looked at the California hills as I traveled south towards the submarine dock, but I had to make a stop on my way. I had to stop at the Getty Museum. Now I know that it seems like a stop at an art museum wouldn't be relevant to making submarine upgrades, but I assure you, it was. While the Getty Museum is known for its artwork and beautiful gardens, there's another lesser-known aspect to the Getty Museum, and that is that they have labs deep underground in the museum where they do scientific research on the preservation of artwork, social integration, art history, art and media studies, the impact of art on history, and they have a lab for propulsion systems. Now, I know that's not what you'd expect, but they could give JPL a run for their money in a few areas, that's for sure. I pulled into the private garage at the Getty and took the tram up the mountain to the museum. I could have parked at a private lot at the top, but I liked the tranquil tram ride and I enjoyed the slow winding trip up the mountain. Once there, I met with Professor Cook, and she signed me in and brought me down into the Getty Propulsion Lab. She had mentioned that the original purpose of the lab was to get art around the world faster, but they started developing experimental engines, and the lab soon evolved into its own thing shortly after. But first, let me tell you a little bit about the Getty Museum itself. The J. Paul Getty Museum, commonly referred to as the Getty, is an art museum in Los Angeles, California, housed on 2 campuses, the Getty Center and the Getty Villa. The villa is by the ocean and has an underground marine biology lab, but that's another story. It is operated by the J. Paul Getty Trust, the world's wealthiest art institution. The Getty Center is located in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles and features pre-20th century European paintings, drawings, illuminated manuscripts, sculpture, decorative arts, and photographs from the inception of photography through present day from all over the world. The original Getty Museum, the Getty Villa, is located in the Pacific Palisades neighborhood of Los Angeles and displays art from ancient Greece and Rome. In 1974, J. Paul Getty opened a museum in a recreation of the Villa of the Papyri at Herculaneum on his property in Malibu, California. In 1983, after an economic downturn in West Germany, the Getty Museum acquired 144 illuminated medieval manuscripts from the financially struggling Ludwig collection in Aachen. In 1996, John Russell, writing in the New York Times, said of the collection, "One of the finest holdings of its kind ever assembled, it is quite certainly the most important that was in private hands." In 1997, the museum moved to its current location in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. The Malibu Museum, renamed the Getty Villa, was renovated and reopened in 2006. Now, many museums turn to their existing social media presences to engage their audience online during the COVID-19 pandemic. Something unorthodox was launched. The Getty sponsored the Getty Museum Challenge, inviting people to use everyday objects to recreate works of art and share their collections on social media, prompting thousands of submissions. The museum was among those singled out for particular praise by industry analysts for their successful social media content strategy during the shutdown, both for the challenge and for incorporating its work into the popular video game Animal Crossing. That was a crossover no one asked for, but seemed to work pretty well, and it brought people a lot of joy, and that's the most important thing. Soon Professor Cook brought me into the Propulsion lab where she presented me with what I had requested. It was a hybrid water desalination hydrogen conversion system. I'll talk more about it later. Now, it was an expensive, cutting-edge piece of technology, but I had helped the museum out a few years back with some 17th century Dutch paintings that seemed to be changing overnight. After an investigation, I solved the mystery after sorting out 17th century painting techniques, a fixed-point time-space anomaly that most assuredly wasn't a wormhole, and some mischievous teenagers who had figured out the security door codes. The museum was quite grateful, and when they told me what they were working on, I put in a request for the hybrid energy part. Now, there was a lot of paperwork to fill out, and it seemed like double because it was an art museum and a science lab, but, so be it. While we waited for the rest of the paperwork, Professor Cook and I sat and ate lunch overlooking the cactus garden. She was telling me about some of the upcoming exhibits, and that there may be a suit of armor she would want me to take a look at, as it seemed to fail the carbon dating test, and the results kept coming back pointing in the wrong direction, like it was somehow from the future. I said I would be happy to take a look when I got back. Professor Cook then asked me about this upcoming adventure, and I told her all about Professor P and the arrogant messenger raven. I also told her about Professor P's claim about knowing the whereabouts of Professor Sampson, my mentor. Professor Cook was silent for a moment, and I knew she was thinking hopeful thoughts. Professor Sampson and Professor Cook were romantically involved a while back, and while it had ended amicably, I knew they both still had feelings for each other. She took it very hard when he disappeared, and was disappointed when I couldn't locate him. She'd also taken a sabbatical from the Getty in order to search for him, and we each followed up on separate leads to save time. But the trail grew cold for both of us. Not wanting to give up, I searched for an additional 6 months, but to no avail. I could see Professor Cook was getting melancholy as we discussed the matter, but she forced a smile and wished me good hunting. She told me to keep my guard up when confronting Professor P and the infinite science cabal. She also told me that if I found Professor Sampson, and then she trailed off a bit. I smiled and told her I would tell him, and that she would be the first to know that I had found him. She smiled, and this seemed to cheer her up a bit. We soon finished our paninis, and we took one last look at the cactus garden in the bright California sun before heading back inside to sign some final paperwork. Everything was ready to go. Professor Cook had an art student load the hybrid water desalination hydrogen conversion system into the back of my car at the bottom of the hill. The Getty scientists called it the Water Engine Transformational System, or WETS for short. I thanked Professor Cook and was soon on my way. I reassured her I would do my absolute best to find Professor Sampson. I enjoyed the tram ride down the mountain just as much as on the way up, as it was relaxing and gave a great elevated view of western Los Angeles. The art student, Brenton, was waiting for me and had already loaded the WET system into my car. He told me he was a bit of a fan and asked for an autograph. That does happen sometimes, especially with students. I'm always flattered, and I was happy to comply. He took a selfie, too. I was soon on my way again. After another 3 hours in LA traffic, I had finished my trip of 18 miles. Such is life in Los Angeles. I pulled into the submarine dry dock, and Frank would meet me shortly. He was deep in the O2's engine room and needed to finish up upgrading the submarine's ballast system. I told him not to worry. I don't stand on formalities. And I would just unload the Getty's hybrid water desalination/hydrogen conversion system and meet him there. I unloaded the WET system from my car and loaded it onto a cart. I began pushing it towards the submarine dry dock where the O2 was being worked on. We would make the necessary upgrades, install the WET system, and soon I would be on my way. I wasn't sure what awaited me at Professor P's lair, but I would try to be as prepared as possible. And I will tell you all about my submarine journey next time. But first, I want to talk to you about something. Tenacity. Tenacity is often mistaken for arrogance in the face of failure. It isn't. Tenacity is sticking around when things get tough and not letting things beat you, the hallmark of any adventurer or scientist worth their salt. And that's one of the lessons Professor Sampson taught me many years back, and what I try to teach to Bradley, among other things. I may have stopped looking for Professor Sampson, but I never gave up. I knew someday a door would open and I would be able to resume the search. Unfortunately, said door is being maliciously held shut by a ruthless and egomaniacal scientist, but I would soon be on my way to open it. So don't give up. Have tenacity. Sure, there will be setbacks, and some may be much longer than you expect. But you'll always be able to get that door open from an evil scientist. So don't give up hope, ever. We can all get there in the end. Good night, adventurers.
The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood was created, written, and performed by Chris Mancini and produced by White Cat Entertainment. It is a work of fiction. Maybe. Music and sound design by Ron Tansky at rontanskymusic.com. For more info and merchandise, including t-shirts, mugs, and blankets, go to whitecatentertainment.com.